Hi everyone, welcome to my book talk. So the book that I decided to reveal for this class was this one, Teaching Pride Forward, Building LGBTQ Allyship in English Language Teaching. This is an edited volume, which means that each chapter was written by a different author or group of authors, and the editors were Dr. Ethan Freen, Dr. Kate Matricirio Reynolds, and Dr. James Coda, who is a professor here at UTK in our department. The concepts that connects all of the chapters is a concept of queer allyship. This is something we discussed in our classes as well, especially towards the end of the semester. This idea of how can we support a minoritized group without being a member of that group, or if I'm positioned in a system of oppression and that grants me privileges, what do I do with this privilege if I want to support a minoritized community? In this case, we talk about queer allyship, so how to dismantle heterosexism and homophobia and heteronormativity in education, even if you're not queer yourself. But we can really make the exercise of expanding this reflection to other different social groups. In the preface of the book, the authors slash editors they provided really good definition of allies that I liked. They cite this study by Brown and Strove to define allies. I'm going to read for you their definition. They say that allies can be distinguished from individuals who are motivated simply to express minimal or no prejudice toward non-dominant group. Allies are people willing to take action, either interpersonally or in larger social settings, and move beyond the self-regulation of prejudice. This definition really makes me think of that famous Angela Davis's quote, that says that being non-racist is not enough. We need to be anti-racist. So this idea of actively fighting against a system of oppression, allyship is something that someone does, not something that someone can passively be, right? Which is something we discussed in our last class as well. So because we're talking about queer allyship here, we're discussing these ideas of, how can you actively fight against homophobia and heterosexism and heteronormativity in your classes if you want to be an ally. One aspect of the book that really stands out to me is the multiplicity of voices, especially from different parts of the globe. So the way this book is organized is in four different parts, and each part is or provides or presents studies from a different geographical location. So for example, in part number one, we have the Pacific Islands. Part number two, studies from the Mediterranean. And then part number three, the Americas. Part number four is not really a geographical location. Moving forward, those are closing remarks of the authors on the further directions or what can we do or we can continue to do to foster queer allyship in the classroom. This multiplicity of voices and geographical locations really makes me think of how our ideals of gender identity and sexuality are really localized historically and geographically, how different societies perceive these ideas or these notions of, or these elements or symbols of gender identity and sexuality. I always like to mention this example. If you think about the society of France in the 16th century, the ideal of masculinity was the figure of the king. He was the model of masculinity that men in France in the 16th century should aspire to be or should aspire to be, right? And we're talking about a person who would wear wigs and stockings and would wear makeup and long gowns, right? If you take those elements to our modern Western society, they wouldn't be read as symbols of masculinity anymore, right? Quite the opposite. A man in the modern Western societies, most of modern Western societies, a man wearing a wig and a long gown and makeup tends to be read as a queer person or as a drag queen. So understanding that our notions of gender identity and sexuality are really geographically and historically localized, I think really opens the door to strengthening local possibilities of initiatives or tools that upend homophobia and heterosexism here this comprehension of how oppression operates differently in different societies is really important because I think it makes us reject this idea of universal solutions or universal strategies to fight systems of oppression, right? Because oppression manifests or is organized differently in different societies, right? So it calls us to understand how our local communities or what are the local strategies communities are using to fight or to challenge the systems of oppression. Throughout the book, we also see a multitude of theoretical and practical tools to foster the development of queer allyship. Intersectionality was a big one. It was present in several of the chapters in the book. But there is also a lot of different connections between different theories. So connection between queer theory and other methodological and theoretical tools. For example, migration studies, multimodality, queer linguistics, and critical pedagogies. Queer literature was a big one as well, and the discussion on how queer literature can really foster empathy and foster allyship is a really interesting one. Another practical tool that I really like is this activity I'm going to show you that is called the LGBTQ language teacher portrait. So the researcher asked queer teachers, queer language teachers, to represent their queer identity and their teacher identity in a drawing. So here are some of the results. I hope you can see it. And then the discussion that follow of, how or why those elements were chosen to be representative of their queer identities or what each element represents is a really interesting one. All right, so here again using multimodality or using arts-based approach to discuss this issue or to discuss how to understand how heterosexism and heteronormativity operates in the educational system of different societies, in this case, in a very localized um, context. Really interesting activity. Towards the end of the book, so in the final part of the book, which is part 4, moving forward, the editors write this closing chapter that discuss further directions. So what can we do in the future to continue to build and foster queer allyship in the classroom? Something that was really interesting for me is that they used the term demonstrative allyship or active allyship that I think is really useful in encapsulating this idea of allyship as an action, something that moves beyond self-regulation. The authors here in the final chapter, they invite the reader to support or to demonstrate their support for the LGBT communities in their teaching, in their research, in their professional engagements, and in their personal lives. There's also this reflection of how can we imagine or how can we envision the world we hope to create? That really made me think about the reading for our last class, this idea of utopia as this tool that keep us moving forward or to help us envision the actions we need to take in the present. So think about the future, we imagine about the future, what is the society we want to build in the future, to inform the decisions or the actions we need to take in the present. There's also this section in the final chapter, really interesting, that is called What Can Allies Do? That discusses the role of allies in the fight for equity. This understanding that, yes, allies are important in this fight, even though the experiences of people from the community should be centered, we still need collaboration from those that hold privilege in our society. So thinking about the future directions towards the end of the book, the authors provide those 3 lists that I think are really interesting. So those are lists of calls to action on research. I hope you can see it. Research, practices, and activism. So if you are looking to understanding more, or if you're looking to doing research or to incorporating queer allyship in your classes, this is a good list to check. I think we have really inspiring and motivating information here on how we can do, how can we act as allies, right? Which is, part of concept of active allyship. Yeah, so overall, this was a great read and make me think about this need, especially this need for localized strategies and fighting systems of oppression, because those systems they take shape differently in different societies. So I think it might be useful for us to think about different strategies of resistance and re-existence in different societies as well. All right, those are my impressions of the book. I hope you liked my review. I hope it motivated you to read more about queer allyship or to incorporate, hopefully, some of those strategies in your teaching. And thank you for watching.